Hello, welcome to another episode of Soul Sessions. I am Debra Maldonado.
I'm Dr. Rob.
And we're excited to continue our series on mindset, the creative mindset. And today we're going to talk about a concept and topic that everyone can relate to, and that's the idea of shame and how to work through it, why it's there, and how we can be empowered.
How not to be ashamed of shame.
How not to be afraid of shame. And before we begin, I do want to remind you, I'd love for you to continue to watch our podcast, get more people to listen by subscribing to our channel. If you're watching us on YouTube, I'd love for you to click the button in the corner to make sure you subscribe and get notification of every new episode when it goes live. So shame is such a heavy topic. We hear it all the time with our clients and then our coaches who deal with their clients. And it's such a sticky subject. And we're going to take it down, tear it apart, and give you a new perspective.
Yeah. And as always, our approach is from the coaching perspective and from an empowerment perspective. Mm-hmm. So we're not talking about trauma. We're not talking about therapy or diagnosis. We actually see shame as a powerful, healthy function of the mind that helps us really fit in. It helps us understand others and relate to others in powerful ways.
Almost empathetic too. I mean, if you didn't understand shame, you wouldn't do it to others, or you're more careful with others' feelings and you're more compassionate.
Yeah, we would do terrible things if we didn't have shame as a kind of a stopping point where it tells us, hey, you're crossing the line here.
And just like in any type of culture, there's certain rules for people to fit in and to function in society. And if there were no unspoken rules, this unconscious unspoken rule, we wouldn't be able to function. We wouldn't know where the boundaries were. So we don't want to look at it as just purely negative or something we want to get rid of. But we do want to have a relationship with it and a healthy relationship with it.
Yeah. So how do people get in trouble with shame?
You look at me. Well, one of the things that I see is that shame is what happens is we become very self-critical. We are so, and I think it's not even that we don't want to, we don't know what shame is, but we fear it. And so we're conditioned to do everything we can to avoid it. But while we're doing that, it's almost like an insecurity that we have it already, and it's something we have to overcome or prove. And so we end up having like low confidence or worried what other people think about us and obsess about what other people think about us. Another thing that happens with shame, how it shows up, is that since it's such a heavy emotion, feeling that we have, most people don't like that feeling of feeling ashamed, that we project it out and we want to like move that energy onto others. And so if we're not aware of our own shame, we tend to be very hypercritical of others. So look online, you see it everywhere on social media, people that are really nasty. Someone posts something really positive and someone tries to tear them down or says negative things. You know, those people like the trolls and things. So you got to think, well, why would someone do that? And it's because they are displacing their own shame and trying to move it onto someone else because it's too much for them to bear. And so when we see those people, instead of thinking they're mean and crazy and hurtful, which, they could be, we start to see, well, what is underneath that? Like having a little compassion, like that person is really in pain and they don't even realize it, which is really, I think, worse. I mean, those of us who do personal growth, we are so self-aware of our own patterns and things that and then the person that isn't aware of their patterns is in a worse state because they can't even, they don't even know they have a problem and they don't even know what they're doing. So,
Yeah, there's a lot of misconception about emotions in general, but shame especially, it's considered like toxic, and you hear all these terrible things about, oh my God, you have shame and therefore you're in a shame spiral and things like that.
Toxic shame.
Yeah, so we want to kind of address that, because that's not a proper understanding of what emotion is, and especially what shame is. Proper emotion, or let's say all emotions are proper. We need them all. They evolved in us, through us, with us, so that we could experience the world in a meaningful way. Without proper emotions, we're not able to experience the fullness of life, man. Really understand the subtle meanings of relationships, of experience. Shame tells us when we're out of sorts with others, right? A big function of our brain is to tell us, how do we fit into the group? How do we contribute to the group in a meaningful way? And how do we coordinate with others so that we're working all together? When we're stepping out of bounds, when we're hurting other people's feelings, sometimes we'll feel shame. And it's a way of our brain telling us, you need to
dial it back a bit.
Watch what's going on. If you need to repair that relationship, go ahead and repair it. And get back to harmony, right? Creating a harmonious relationship.
But don't you think that some people use shame as more of a manipulation, or like almost a way to control people? If you shame them, you're kind of taking away their power. Or I guess no one can shame you without your permission.
Well, let's go to the beginning. Parents, right? We all know that parents sometimes use shame to keep us in line, right?
Go to your room.
Well, no, that go to your room is more like a negative reinforcer, right? Something like that. But it's that you did something wrong. You did something wrong, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
You're being bad versus you did a bad thing. You're a bad boy. You're a bad girl.
Yeah. That's often used to discipline children in a non-physical punishment way, right? In other words, you don't have to spank them. You can simply kind of point out that they're being bad, right, by doing these things.
My father used to just give us the look, and we all were like,
That's right.
The look.
Point to the belt.
The disappointing look, because think about it, that's going to like that really deep early brain of reading that. I mean, if you think about it, watch any pet video of when the pets ruin the house and they tape the pet and it's like hiding, like it knew it did something wrong, tail between its legs. I mean, it's so ancient in us, this feeling.
Yeah, it's part of the limbic system, which is the emotional brain in us, and it's very sensitive. So as children, what happens is that we learn to associate shame with doing something wrong, doing something bad, being bad, or being seen as bad.
And disappointing others.
Disappointing really important people in our lives, which are our parents. So it leaves a powerful imprint in our mind. So let's assume a child or any one of us grows up in a critical household where shame is used to discipline us. Now, the parents love the kid, or the child, but they want the best for them, and so they're using this parenting style, say, to help the kid grow up to be a good person, right? But the interpretation that the child makes is an emotional interpretation, not a cognitive one,
an intellectual, rational. Yeah,
it's a more of an emotional imprint that they walk away with from that family experience. So they carry the shame into adulthood, and now they're very cautious of situations where they might expose themselves to shame situations. So that if a promotion comes up and the opportunity for them to step up into that position, they might refuse it and say, no, I don't want it because it's too risky. I would risk being shamed.
Or public speaking. I mean, this is why public speaking is the biggest fear people have, is because you're putting yourself on stage for judgment of others. Yeah.
What if people shame me?
They're like sending their daggers at you and tearing you apart.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
And It's terrifying because of that sensitivity of the amygdala and the limbic system. The emotional brain has now tuned into very powerfully into these situations where we are exposing ourselves to shame.
And so we're tapping into that ancient part of our brain that's already programmed to avoid shame. And it's like almost like amplifying it in a way.
Yeah. And again, we're here talking about typical situations, not pathological or
serious
disorders.
traumas and stuff like that.
It's simply kind of everyday experiences, right? Like you're saying, even public speaking, many people are afraid of it. Why? Because it exposes people to this self or the possibility of being criticized and shamed.
Well, you know what's interesting is there's a movie with, I can't think of his name, but they're lost in the woods. The guy who, Bill Baldwin, he's in it, and his wife was, he was married and he was with his father-in-law, and they were lost in the woods and they couldn't find their way out. And he said that most people, they don't get out, and it's not because they can't figure it out. It's that they're ashamed that they got lost in the first place, and then they end up just dying in the woods rather than being rescued because they'd rather not face the shame. Isn't that incredible? Yeah. So it's like we do the most ridiculous things. And then, like you always say, like, it's not even real. It's like our mind made up this narrative and this kind of a big, scary thing that's going to happen. This monster, this boogie monster that's in our closet that's going to come out if we are ashamed. And if we can kind of work through it, we can be invincible. We can face it and we can overcome it.
Yes, because it is a useful and natural part of our mind system, our ability to sense the meaning of the world, the meaning of our social situations. We want to bring it up to speed. In other words, we want to work with it in a conscious way instead of trying to suppress it, trying to avoid it or overpower it. We want to say, well, okay, what is this function of my mind and how can I use it in a creative way where it serves me and my higher purpose, right? It's going to serve us in achieving the kind of life that we want to achieve, that we need to achieve.
Well, I mean, some of the things that just practically, like you want to be a good citizen, you want to be, take care of people, you want to be, do moral things in the world, you don't want to intentionally harm, but you don't need shame to regulate that. And I think we think that when we're kids, we were regulated because we didn't know any better. We were this innocent, blob of being, and we didn't know where the boundaries were. So we pushed the boundaries and then we got pushed back. And we needed that at the time, or else we would be all wild people and we didn't have wildings. And then, but as adults, we tend to use the same strategies our parents told us to keep us in line, but we're wiser. We don't need to rely on our conditioning to regulate our behavior anymore. So it's like almost time to grow up. It was great the first part of life to help us build a strong ego, regulate, fit in. But like we talk about in Jungian coaching, it's always about transcending the ego. And the second part of life is about becoming free of those things. Not to reprogram and make yourself not shamed, but actually see that you don't need that to actually make decisions in your life anymore. But it's a process. It's not just, I decide I'm not going to make a decision from shame anymore. There's a deeper process that happens.
Yeah, in the Jungian psyche, what I love about it is that it always considers the opposites. So, for example, if for someone that grows up with shame, we know that self-doubt is kind of one of the expressions of that. Right?
Like their persona is.
Yeah, that they're always second guessing themselves. Did I do the right thing? Did I say the right thing in the right way? All that kind of self-criticism is because we basically internalize our home situation and we bring it with us wherever we go. So we're carrying around our parents' voice essentially with us. So self-doubt, we can say, is probably one of the main characteristics of people that grow up in shame-based households.
So when you say self-doubt, I'd like to just add that it's sort of like we don't know if it's safe or not. So we have this doubt, this ambiguity about what if I do anything outside of my pattern of what will happen. So we don't trust ourselves in a way.
That's right. Now, in Jungian psychology, we see that as part of the persona. In other words, it's become integrated into this person's mask, the way they appear to others and the way they present themselves socially. Now, what happens in the persona is that the opposite end of the spectrum of self-doubt, which is confidence, right? What we call a powerful personality, a powerful presence.
Dynamic and willing to take on the world.
Willing to risk.
I told that to a client once when we first started working together. I said, she's like, I just don't want to stop being so insecure. And I said, well, confidence is in your shadow. And she said, oh my God, I think this idea, this is like a mistaken idea that we have to build confidence, that we have to go out and work to get there. But with the shadow work, it's like it's already there. We're just repressing it. And so how do we remove the barriers for us being accepting of our natural confidence?
That's right. And it's a spectrum. Once you start to integrate it, it doesn't mean you always have to be confident in it. If you're not confident, you're messing up. It simply means now you have that full range of what we call shame, from all the way from being very confident and not feeling shame, all the way to feeling shame when it's proper, when you're out of bounds or you said something that hurt somebody's feelings. You might feel shame and you acknowledge that, oh, okay, this is helping me understand I'm out of bounds here and I need to pull it back a little bit.
You know, it's interesting. In the Bible, like Adam and Eve, they were naked for a long time. And just like when we were kids, we were born like, just running around naked. We didn't have any worries about what people are looking at us, what our body looked like. And then eventually we were told you got to put clothes on. And so it's almost like the myth of, Adam and Eve. We could look at that as a symbolic representation of like every human being we've given that shame, and it's like, there's a point where we were free and then we get shame and then it kind of limits us. And it creates the human condition. So very strong, powerful part of being human. And so if you think about, I'm not confident, you were at one point, because at one point you didn't care about anything. You were happy and bubbling little baby and everything was taken care of for you. Everything was there for you. You got fed and someone changed your diaper and you weren't self-conscious at all. And so we can look at that and say, yeah, there was a time, even in my current life, my experience, that I had that freedom. And so it didn't go anywhere. It's just that it's covered up with our life conditioning and repressed into our shadow. So
think about it this way. The more shame that you experience currently in your life, if you're one of, or if you're a human being, right? We all experience shame. But if you've experienced shame in a powerful way that you felt it's really a problem for me, you have a lot of stored up confidence in your unconscious mind that is ready to be expressed and ready to counteract that persona of shame and give you the balance that you need, right? Give you the proper balance. So like you're saying, it's within you already. You're not going to have to take a course on confidence or
say affirmations. I'm good enough. People like me. I do good things. I'm confident.
It's already within you.
Yeah.
But you do have to do some inner work to bring it out, right? To
remember,
to integrate it,
yeah,
as Jung would say. So a couple of the other factors that we see in some of us that grew up in critical households, we view everything from the perspective of shame. Of course, what this means, like, it's like that projection you were talking about, that we project our fear of shame externally, and we think every situation is rife with this potential for me to be shamed. Therefore, I have to be always cautious. We're projecting it. We're saying it's out there. But what we're seeing is our own mind, right? Our own fear, our own shadow. And the other one is that we feel inadequate. We feel inadequate, right? Because we start to feel like that our fear of that, our hesitation to do things, makes us inadequate, or is...
Well, it actually does in a way. Like, it's not that you are inadequate, but you're operating from an inadequacy of not your true potential. You know, you're it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy that you feel inadequate so that you do inadequate things, and you do things inadequately, or you perceive that that's what everything you do is inadequate or not enough. And it becomes that kind of like a gerbil wheel, a cycle that you just, the loop that you get stuck in.
Right. So the question then becomes, how do we tap into the shadow to balance out the persona of shame, right? Because the shadow contains the opposite of the personality or the mask that we wear. It's going to balance it out. So Jung says we have to make the unconscious conscious. In other words, we have to bring what we were unaware of into our awareness and accept it as this is also part of who we are.
Do you think that people that have a persona of super hyper confidence, they would have the shadow of shame?
It could, if they haven't done the work.
Yeah.
That's the principle of opposites.
So we look up to people, they're like, wow, they're so confident and they're so this, but it doesn't feel natural or feels like a show almost. And then they haven't dealt with that. Yeah. And I think we all have to understand that our human, like we want to like have compassion for our humanity. And, we all feel this way. So there's nothing to be ashamed of. Like if we, we feel ashamed, like it's like embracing, like you said, as integrating that, accepting that as part of our human nature, but it doesn't have to run our life. And we don't need it to regulate. Like we don't need to have fear to run from a bear. Like we could just say, you know what, bears are dangerous. I don't need to build up a lot of fear around me to do that. Or I don't need a lot of fear around me to put a lock on my door in my house. It's just like, oh, that's a practical thing to do. But we often think that these emotions, these like shame, is something direct that needs to be there for us to survive.
Yes. So now we want to start to see it as it's the best thing that has ever happened to us, this feeling of shame. It's the best thing that ever happened to us. Instead of it's this toxic, terrible experience that I'm afraid of or that I need to get rid of at all costs, we treasure it as a gift from nature, from our evolution, from our mind, our psyche, that it's given us this powerful tool in order for us to be complete and to feel the world in this meaningful way. So how do we do that? First of all, insight. Well, what you're doing right now, listening to this podcast, is you're gaining insight into the nature of your mind. That is the first step. But a lot of people stop here, and that's a mistake. We don't want to stop at insight. Insight is essential, but it's not enough. We need to keep moving through the growth process. So what comes after insight?
We have to go toward what we fear. So we have to go toward the fear of shame. And we have to, and usually that happens when we're triggered. So a situation happens, you're embarrassed, and you are conscious of that, how you hold yourself back. Instead of trying to leapfrog over it and make it better and convince the other person that is maybe accusing you of something to that you're right or what, fighting back from it, we just sit with it and be like, okay, well, there's something here. Like, why am I triggered? That person, like I said, no one can make you feel ashamed. The shame comes from within you. And think of their actions as neutral. And that it's almost like a puzzle piece. If you're open, like it connects to you and you're part of that piece. And so you have to work on your piece. And so I would go toward that fear, like, what is so bad about that? And get curious about, that's interesting. I feel so embarrassed and it feels like the end of the world. That person rejected me, or someone, I told a lie and someone caught me in the lie. And now I'm feeling really shameful, or I made a huge mistake at work and everyone is like pointing fingers at me. It's an opportunity. And so these random things that show up are really there to help us. They're not to reinforce. It could either reinforce that, yes, there's something to be afraid of, and you go back to your own patterns of defensiveness and maybe kicking the dog, the syndrome where you pass that shame to someone else, or you really own it and say, this is interesting. Why is this bothering me? And really get curious about why this is such a big deal. For me, that was one of the questions I would ask myself all the time. Why am I making this such a big deal? This person said this person said this, and I felt this. Why is this such a big deal for me? Like, it feels like the end of the world. And then we start really questioning and opening that up. And the key to this too is to not do it within your mind. You're doing it what we call the witness mind, where you're asking the question, like it's like the wisdom in you is asking the question, and you're sitting there listening to the answer and just watching your mind, and you're just watching it. And as you're doing that, you're purifying it. You're starting to untangle the knot that locks you into this reactive, rigid response that we do, that we usually respond to shame. And we start to open it up. And you'll find that the original situation that triggered you is actually will resolve itself in a way. And people will either come back and apologize, or that person will not be in your life anymore. You'll get a new job where there's a different dynamic happening. It's like the pattern will automatically break, because if you change the way you respond to life, life will change for you. But if you respond to life in the same exact way all the time with your old pattern, you're going to keep getting the same results.
I love that. The witness mind is really very powerful, because in the witness mind, we're dropping the duality of good and bad, especially towards the emotion. We're not judging the emotions as either good or bad. Why? Because it's a false duality. Again, emotions are not good or bad. They're simply there to teach us and guide us as to what is it that we're experiencing. Think of emotions as the meaning-making function of our psyche, the meaning-making function of our mind. It's the way we make meaning, in other words. If we don't have the full range of emotions and their full potential, we're not really grasping the meaning of our life. That's why sometimes we feel empty, or that we didn't get satisfaction from an experience, because there's something or our misunderstanding of what emotions are and what they mean for us.
It's like you were saying, like we're afraid to really fully feel because we don't want to feel the bad things. So we're not even allowing ourselves to be happy. I know I worked with so many people, thousands of people over the past 20 years. And one of the biggest questions I ask someone is, tell me a happy memory. And that is the hardest question I ask, because we're so used to looking at problems and not remembering that we've had such good life. And so I just think that's so important, that we have the whole spectrum of emotion. And because we're afraid to feel those good feelings, we lock out, or the bad feelings, we lock ourselves out from the good feelings, or even imprint them strongly in our mind. Did you say that negative emotions have a stronger imprint than the positive?
Yeah, well, what we label as negative emotions, because there are no negative emotions. There's simply
or like uncomfortable emotions. Yeah. Maybe I should say,
Yeah. So the phase of really looking at our emotions in this non-judgmental way and observing them, right? And staying with them instead of pushing them away is important. Now, we're not pushing them away, meaning we're not repressing them, which is typically what we do with uncomfortable emotions. We're not repressing them, but we're not buying into them either. In other words, we're not buying into the old pattern of shame and thinking, oh my God, I did such a terrible thing, or I'm such a bad person because of this experience. We're simply observing and then asking deeper questions of, what am I really afraid of? Like, what is the deeper root of this fear of shame? And what that does, it starts to show us the deeper roots of our shame.
And one of the things that it shows too when you sit with this is all the ways you defended against it and how it's shown up in your life. And it's almost like that you start connecting the dots. And you're like, oh, this is why I didn't go for that promotion, or oh, this is why I ran away from that relationship, or this is why, I don't talk to my father or my mother anymore, or my sister, and this is, why I don't make the best of myself or step into my purpose because of this thing. And how you see how much it's been running your life, and then you start to be able to free your mind and say, well, if I created my life through this mechanism, then I have the ability to create something else. And you start to see that these bad luck experiences or these things that didn't work out for you, that you played a part in that. So you have that empowerment now that you can change your life. And I think that is such an amazing experience for people to really take responsibility and how that pattern contributed to their results and then empowered to change it.
Yes. And we said insight is not enough, because it's simply an intellectual understanding of the emotional experience. What is enough, or where we want to get to, is an emotional acceptance of our emotional experience. An emotional acceptance of our emotional experience. In other words, we're not judging it as good or bad. We're simply acknowledging that these are powerful emotions that we're having, and they're giving us the meaning of our human experience. That is what Jung called integration. It's acceptance of our human condition and our human experience in all its nakedness, in all its beauty, and it's all its powerful experience.
So initially we have defenses against these emotions that keep our conditioning and our patterns in place. So when we're going toward it, what we're doing is really dismantling the defenses, because now we're not afraid of it anymore. We're feeling it fully, and there's no need to defend it, because we are like, okay, I didn't die. I felt this and I didn't die. It didn't destroy me. And now you feel more empowered versus let me get rid of it, put it in a little dark energy bubble and send it off, or cover it with light and change it and get rid of it. We're saying, bring it on. And then you become beyond the ego, because the ego wants to kind of keep it under wraps and operates in that defensiveness. So then what comes after that? What comes after, who are you after you do this work and you go through that transformation?
We tap into what we call the creative mind. The creative mind, we can think of it as our natural mind. What is there before we're conditioned? It's a creative mind, meaning we feel in tune with our environment. We feel that it is one, that it's one thing we're experiencing, that our mind, or what we call our mind, and the environment is really one thing. And actually, that's what it is. There's pretty good evidence now from neuroscience, as well as from the ancient wisdom traditions, and even quantum mechanics, right? They're talking about how our experience is really created from our observation of it, the observer effect. That we create our life, our world, through observing it, through experiencing it. In other words, it's us that we're seeing in the world.
So you're saying that our conditioning and our ego is our unnatural mind.
It's our condition. Right?
Conditioned mind. But it's kind of like it's not really our true nature. Like, that's people
right.
heard the true nature, and it's our natural mind is we were born with. Again, we were born that naked, happy baby with grabbing our toes and not caring about the world or what it thinks of us. We just wanted to, be. And then slowly we were conditioned to be human and follow rules and protect ourselves and create this little ego that's, going to help us survive. And again, it's all a natural part of our evolution. But the second part of our evolution, which very few people do, is undertake the individuation process, which is Jung's name for becoming our true self. And not rewiring our patterns, but actually seeing ourselves in our natural state outside of those patterns where there's pure potential, pure possibility, and we don't have to act inside those barriers anymore.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the emphasis is not on rewiring, but there is a transformation that occurs in the brain. We know from studies that people that meditate, people that contemplate, people that read, anything that you do that leads you towards more self-realization changes the structure and function of your brain. So
you will rewire your brain, but you're not doing it you're going to the next level versus fixing like a program, like a cassette tape or a computer, like upgrading that software. You're kind of adding more, almost more brain activity, a more expansive way it's stimulating that intellect, that higher intellect.
Yeah, I think of it like with athletes that work out their full bodies, right? There's a tremendous change within their physical body. It's the same with our mind. When we activate this individuation process, this process of inner growth, our minds become their full potential or express their full potential, and therefore we're operating at a very different level, right? We transcend our old patterns, our old conditioning, and we enter into this creative mind. Yeah.
So great topic today. I think a lot of people will resonate with it. So next week we're going to talk about the hero's journey
in relationship to plant medicine.
It's a very interesting topic. We hope you enjoy it next week. Stay tuned. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast service. But also, I'd love for you, if you're on YouTube watching us, click the button in the corner to subscribe to our channel. And one more thing, we do have our May cohort for the Jungian Life Coach training. It's an incredible in-depth, comprehensive program. It's a year long. We'd love for you to be a part of it. We do have limited seats and we're almost halfway full. So we would love for you to check it out. Click the link in the show notes and find out more about the program. Book a call with our admissions director today. Take care.
See you next time.
See you next week.